October 7, 1947, 2:14 p.m. Bumpy Johnson's office above Small's Paradise. Two men in suits walked in carrying an envelope. Federal agents. They didn't introduce themselves, didn't show badges, just placed the envelope on Bumpy's desk and said four words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We thought you should know." Then they left. Bumpy stared at the envelope for 5 minutes. Brown paper, no markings, sealed. Something inside him knew before he opened it, knew what kind of message required federal agents delivering it personally, knew that whatever was inside that envelope would be something he couldn't unsee. He opened it slowly, pulled out a single photograph, 8 by 10, black and white, and what he saw in that photograph, what had been done to the man in the image, made Bumpy Johnson, who'd seen violence his entire life, who'd witnessed things that would break most people, set the photo down with shaking hands and not speak for 2 full days. Because the man in that photograph was James "Jimmy" Crawford, Bumpy's childhood friend from Charleston, South Carolina, the boy he'd grown up with, played with, learned to read with, and what the Klan had done to Jimmy, what that photograph documented in horrible detail, was a message to every black person who thought they could stand up, could fight back, could demand equality. The federal agents had brought it to Bumpy because Jimmy had been working with civil rights organizers in South Carolina, had been registering black voters, had been speaking at churches, and the Klan had made an example of him. Bumpy Johnson and Jimmy Crawford met in 1915. Both were 10 years old, growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, different neighborhoods but attending the same segregated school. Jimmy was quiet, studious, always had a book, always reading. Bumpy was tougher, already getting into fights, already developing the reputation that would follow him to Harlem. But they were friends, real friends, the kind that share lunch when one forgets theirs, the kind that walk home together even when it's out of the way, the kind that tell each other secrets nobody else knows. Jimmy taught Bumpy to read better, spent hours helping him with homework. Bumpy protected Jimmy from bullies who thought reading made you weak. It was a partnership, balanced, good. In 1919, Bumpy moved to Harlem. His family sent him north after his older brother got in trouble. Needed to get him away from Charleston, away from the violence, the racism, the danger of being a young black man in South Carolina who didn't know how to keep his head down. Bumpy and Jimmy stayed in touch. Letters at first, then occasional phone calls when Bumpy made enough money. The letters were full of life updates. Jimmy finished school, became a teacher, got married, had 3 kids, taught at the same segregated school they'd attended. Bumpy's letters were less detailed, told Jimmy he was working in Harlem, making money, doing well, didn't mention how he made that money, didn't mention the numbers racket, the enforcement work, the things he had to do to survive in a city that wasn't much better than Charleston, just different. By the 1940s, the letters became less frequent. Life got busy, distance grew. Bumpy always thought of Jimmy as that kid who helped him learn to read, who believed Bumpy was smart even when teachers didn't, who saw something in him beyond the anger and the fights. In 1946, Jimmy's letters started changing tone. He was getting involved in something important, civil rights work, helping black folks register to vote. The war was over. Black soldiers had come home. They'd fought for democracy overseas. Now they wanted it at home. Jimmy was organizing, quiet, careful, but organizing, teaching people their rights, helping them fill out voter registration forms, speaking at churches about equality, about change coming, about standing up. Bumpy wrote back warning him, "Jimmy, be careful. You know what South Carolina's like. You know what happens to people who push too hard. You've got a wife, 3 kids. Don't make yourself a target." Jimmy's response was simple. "If not me, then who? If not now, then when? Somebody has to stand up, Bumpy. Somebody has to say enough. I'm a teacher. I teach kids to read, to think, to believe they matter. How can I teach them that and then not live it myself?" Bumpy understood, respected it, but worried. Worried because he knew what white supremacy did to black people who challenged it, knew the history, knew the violence, knew that men like Jimmy, good men, principled men, often became examples, often became warnings. September 1947. Jimmy's letters stopped. Bumpy noticed after 3 weeks, usually heard from Jimmy monthly. This time, nothing. He called the school where Jimmy taught. They said Jimmy hadn't been to work, said his wife reported him missing, said she'd gone to the police, but they weren't investigating. Just another missing black man. Nothing unusual, nothing urgent. Bumpy made more calls, asked around, used connections, found out Jimmy had been organizing a voter registration drive, had registered 50 black folks in 2 weeks, had been warned by local whites to stop, had continued anyway, then disappeared. Gone. No trace. October 7th, 1947. The federal agents arrived. The FBI had been monitoring KKK activity in South Carolina, had informants, had photographs, had evidence of what happened to Jimmy Crawford. They brought one photograph to Bumpy, not as evidence, not as part of an investigation, but as a courtesy. Because they knew Bumpy and Jimmy were friends, thought he deserved to know. When Bumpy opened that envelope, when he saw what was in that photograph, everything stopped. The image showed Jimmy, or what was left of him. The details were horrific. The violence was extreme. The hatred was visible in every aspect of what had been done. But worse than the physical harm was the staging. The photograph was taken deliberately, carefully, like a trophy, like proof, like a warning to anyone else who might think about registering voters or demanding rights. Bumpy set the photograph down. His hands were shaking, not from fear, not from weakness, from rage, from grief. From the overwhelming weight of knowing his childhood friend, the boy who'd taught him to read, who'd believed in peaceful change, who'd done everything right, had been tortured and murdered for the crime of helping people vote. Junie Bird was in the office, saw Bumpy's face. "Boss, what is it?" Bumpy didn't answer, couldn't answer, just sat there, staring at nothing. Junie picked up the photograph, looked at it, set it down immediately. His face went pale. "Oh, God. Who is it?" "James Crawford, my friend from Charleston." "When did this happen?" 3 weeks ago. According to the agents, he was taken from his home. His wife and kids were made to watch. Then he was taken to the woods. And they did this. They photographed it, like it was something to be proud of. Junie was quiet for a long moment. "What are we going to do?" "Nothing." "What?" Bumpy's voice was flat. Empty. "We're going to do nothing. The people who did this are in South Carolina, protected by local law enforcement. Probably our local law enforcement. The federal agents who brought this photograph, they're not investigating. They're documenting. There's no justice coming, no arrests, no trials, just documentation. So we do nothing. Boss, we can't just Bumpy's voice cut through. Yes, we can. Because if I go down there, if I try to do something, I'll get myself killed. And I won't change anything. Jimmy knew the risks. He chose to do it anyway, and they killed him for it. That's the reality. That's America in 1947. For 2 days, Bumpy didn't speak. Mamie, his wife, tried to talk to him, asked what was wrong. He showed her the photograph. She looked at it for 3 seconds, turned away, started crying. "Bumpy, I'm so sorry. I know you and Jimmy were close. We have to do something. There's nothing to do. The system protects the people who did this. But we can't just let it go. We have to. Because the alternative is getting more people killed, and I won't do that. Not even for Jimmy." On the 3rd day, Bumpy went to Abyssinian Baptist Church. Sat in the back, alone. Reverend Powell saw him, came over, sat down beside him. "Brother Johnson, I heard about your friend." Bumpy nodded. Said nothing. "I'm sorry. For your loss. For the evil that took him. For the world we live in where such things happen." Bumpy's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. He was trying to help people vote, that's all. Just helping people exercise their basic rights. And they killed him for it. Tortured him. Made his family watch, then photographed it like a hunting trophy. Reverend Powell had tears in his eyes. "I know. I've seen those photographs before. Different victims. Same hatred. It's the darkest part of who we are as a nation." "What do I do with this?" Bumpy asked. "How do I carry this? How do I know my friend died that way and just keep living?" "You remember him?" Reverend Powell said. "You remember the boy who taught you to read? The man who believed change was possible? The father who wanted his children to grow up in a better world? You remember that he didn't die because he was weak. He died because he was strong, because he scared them, because he showed other people they could stand up too. That's worth remembering. But it doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Because every person he helped register to vote, they're going to remember him. Every person he taught to read, they're going to remember him. Every child he inspired, they're going to remember him, and they're going to keep going. That's how change happens, not from one victory, from 1,000 small acts of courage. And Jimmy had that courage. Bumpy kept the photograph, locked it in his safe, never looked at it again. But he knew it was there, a reminder of what happened to good people in a country that claimed to value freedom. He wrote to Jimmy's wife, sent money, enough to cover expenses for a year, enough to help her and the kids relocate if they wanted, enough to show that Jimmy wasn't forgotten. She wrote back thanking him, said she was moving to Philadelphia, couldn't stay in South Carolina after what happened. Too many memories, too much fear. Said she'd never forget that Jimmy talked about Bumpy, about how they grew up together, about how Bumpy protected him from bullies, about how sometimes the toughest people have the kindest hearts. In 1964, 17 years after Jimmy's murder, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Bumpy watched the news coverage, saw black people voting in South Carolina, saw the change Jimmy had died trying to create. He thought about that photograph locked in his safe, thought about his friend who'd believed change was possible even when it cost everything, thought about courage, real courage, not the kind that comes from violence or intimidation, the kind that comes from standing up knowing you might not survive it. That night, Bumpy took the photograph out of the safe, looked at it one final time, then burned it, watched it turn to ash. Because Jimmy Crawford deserved better than to be remembered as a victim in a photograph. He deserved to be remembered as a teacher, a father, a friend, a man who believed so strongly in equality that he gave his life for it. Junie Bird asked years later why Bumpy had been so quiet after receiving that photograph, why he hadn't sought revenge, why he'd let it go. Bumpy's answer was simple. Because Jimmy wouldn't have wanted revenge. He would have wanted progress. He would have wanted people to keep registering voters, keep demanding rights, keep believing change was possible. Revenge wouldn't have honored him. But the Civil Rights Act did. Every black person who voted in South Carolina after 1964 did. Every child who got an education and believed they mattered did. That's Jimmy's legacy. Not the photograph, not the violence, not the hatred, the progress. If this story showed you that some people sacrifice everything for change they'll never see, hit subscribe. Drop a like if you understand that courage isn't absence of fear, it's action despite it. Comment with respect for the James Crawfords of history who stood up knowing the cost. More stories of sacrifice and consequence coming next.